of all, the story of Jesus as we have been taught it is not the actual story. And yes, he was love, and he was here to anchor a whole new paradigm of consciousness onto the planet. And let's view it as, okay, everybody knows the story of the Last Supper. I'm going to give us some background, and then we'll get to the answer. If you are a film producer, and you're going to be producing the Last Supper, you've got Jesus in the, key male role actor. Judas is in the supporting actor role. And what happens is, the Last Supper, everybody knows, Jesus turned to Judas and said, okay, you know what you have to do for me to fulfill my destiny, go do it. And yet that's saying, no man hath greater love than to give his life for a friend. Isn't that what Judas did? I mean, he lost his family, his possessions, his reputation. He's still maligned 2,000 years later for allowing his friend to fulfill his destiny, to anchor this paradigm of love onto the planet, which would germinate 2,000 years later to allow mankind to move forward into the next stage of its growth. That's the bigger picture. Now, what Jesus, according to the story, died on the cross. But the key part of the story isn't that he died on the cross. It was 3 days later when he said, hey guys, I'm back. Because he was showing that we could transcend the illusion of death and move forward into a greater consciousness. And then if you get into a lot of the more apocryphal readings, after Jesus came back, he started his travels. And if you get into, he showed up in Tibet, he showed up in the American Indians, talked about the Great White Father who came there and told them about the peace and love that was going to be on the planet. He showed up in India. And my understanding is he died of a ripe old age out in Tibet. But it's really interesting because that's not the storyline as we have been brought to understand it. And it's really interesting because Jesus was an Essene, and the Essenes were called the hair shirts of the desert, and they basically practiced a very different type of Judaism. And they had anointing with water, they had, instead of rabbis, they called them bishops, and they had a very different way. And Jesus, by the way, was a rabbi. And the other thing which will dispel a lot of, or push a lot of people's comfort zones, as a rabbi, you had to be married. You could not be a rabbi unless you were married. And so Jesus was married to his companion, which was wife in ancient Aramaic. It translates as companion, but a companion was a wife. And he was married to Mary Magdalene. So, there's a whole lot of stories around here, which I hope I didn't push too many people's buttons here. But if you do your research in the apocryphal readings, you're going to find that a lot of this rings true and has a lot of merit to it. So, yes, and by the way, that when Jesus was on the cross, the soldier who basically stabbed him under his armpit had did that so that he would be able to live. What happened was the way his body was collapsed on the cross, his diaphragm could not open up so that he could breathe. So by slitting on the side underneath his arm and the rib, it allowed him to be able to breathe so that then they could take him in, do the procedures that they did to bring him back into life. And it was also really interesting because Jesus was part of the male Essene tradition and the male brotherhood. And Mary Magdalene was part of the sisterhood. And what happened is that was one of the first unions between the esoteric thought of men and women that came together. And Mary Magdalene and 4 other women held his soul essence and then did the work to help heal the body so that he could come back 4 days later and say, hey guys, I'm back, and have the rising. It's real interesting, but if people, hopefully they're not throwing cabbages at the radio screen right now. But that was really a loaded question here.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you. And it looks like we're just about... Oh, did you have something else you'd like to add?
I want everybody to realize is that they are thinking negatively about themselves. They have programmed, and if that's been a habit pattern for them, they have cellular programs that are forcing them into that pattern. And it's a matter of getting them resolved so that they can then move forward into loving themselves and changing their lives. Because as long as you are beating up upon yourself, there is no hope for you to get out of it because you're always beating up on self. once you release that impetus to beat up on yourself, you can now, for the first time, move forward with a freedom to make different choices. And SRT, Spiritual Response Therapy, is an incredible vehicle to allow you to do that. And it's not like psychotherapy where you come back every week for additional sessions for 2.5 years. You do it once, and occasionally there's some touch-ups if you have additional programs running. And usually every couple of, maybe every 4, 5, 6 months, you'll trigger some new programs and you'll know it. You might need a touch-up, which takes like 10, 15 minutes. But it's amazing the freedom you will have to move forward.
That's right. That is so true. And I want to just let you know that Rave555 commented on Blog TV. He's listening from Blog TV. I think it was about the story of Jesus. Very interesting. And Nan said, this is fascinating. So that's just awesome. And I want